Once America's most beautiful voice, Joan Baez. Her life has taken a tragic turn at 83. She revealed the terrible truth after decades of mental illness. Her famous father abused her sexually. The folk hero who dated Bob Dylan and Steve Jobs now sleeps in a treehouse and talks to plants. She named a tree the counselor since it listens better than her therapists. Her death is shocking for the woman who sang with Martin Luther King. Joan Baez's biography started before she sung. Her scientist father, Albert Baez, was smart. He invented the X-ray microscope as a Stanford undergraduate. He was distinguished by his conscience as much as his mind. He declined high-paying defense employment during the Cold War because he refused to work on weapons. He chose quieter, less lucrative work at universities and UNESCO. According to his daughter, we would never have all the fine and worthless things small girls crave as they grow older. Instead, we'd have a moral father. Joan inherited that integrity. Joan was a little girl whose family moved often. It was eye-opening to visit Baghdad, where her father was helping set up university science programs. Joan was exposed to stark differences at 10. She recalls landing in the heat and confusion and seeing cops thrash a beggar at the airport entrance. She watched people searching through garbage, toddlers crawling on the streets, and animals mistreated in the months that followed. She caught several illnesses while reading Anne Frank's diary. Years later, she added, our small souls witnessed the same things and absorbed different things from it. Carried its weight. She kept that year. It opened her eyes and heart. Back in California, Joan noticed more injustice. Even though she was born in New York, her Mexican ethnicity made her feel different. Some classmates nicknamed her Stupid Mexican. She didn't fit in with the Mexican students either. Her Spanish was non-existent. She felt trapped, yet it honed her morality. She said, I wasn't accepted because I was brown, but I realized the actual issue was blacks. That understanding influenced her later decisions, such as singing at black colleges instead of segregated white audiences in the South. Despite her professional peril, the Quaker faith became another major impact on her at this period. Her family became Quakers, a peace and justice-focused society, when Joan was 8. She adopted their values fast. She remembered dinnertime discussions about war, peace, and morality. She cried during a Martin Luther King Jr. address aged 15. Soon after, she skipped a school Cold War air raid drill. That subtle defiance got her in the local news and started her advocacy. At the first Newport Folk Festival in 1959, something spectacular happened. A barefoot 18-year-old Joan Baez, with no record deal or recognition, took the stage with a borrowed guitar. Only 2 songs with folk singer Bob Gibson. However, those minutes altered everything. Her high, pure voice, unlike anything the crowd had ever heard, silenced them. Now everyone was talking about this mysterious teen. Pete Seeger and Bo Diddley played that night, but Joan was the buzz of the town. She performed at Newport for decades, even into her 80s, but that one night in 1959 made her famous. Record labels signed her. A year later, at 19, Joan recorded her first album in an odd place. A dilapidated Manhattan Towers hotel ballroom. It wasn't fancy. She recorded on a dusty rug with 2 mics, attempting to avoid Wednesday bingo games. Just her voice and guitar, no fancy production. However, that honest sound became special. After initially failing to chart, the album reached number 15 and stayed there for nearly 3 years. Joan picked Vanguard Records over Columbia because they guaranteed her artistic freedom. That album would be called one of America's most significant by the Library of Congress years later. Joan quietly gained confidence at Club 47 in Cambridge near Harvard before the festivals and records. When she first performed there, the room was virtually empty and she was scared. Someone about her was unforgettable. She seemed enigmatic, almost supernatural. Crowds grew within weeks. Street lines formed soon. As a coffeehouse singer in 1959, she went from $10 to $25 a night. Her voice and charisma were tested on that small stage in front of an audience that couldn't look away. At Newport, Madonna sang barefoot, establishing her barefoot persona. It became more than a quirk. Her bare feet symbolized her purity and defiance against the polished artificial music world. She was treated like a saint despite her displeasure. She wrote, I am not perfect. I'm noisy. As time went on, she felt pressure to be flawless. Joan gained serenity in her 80s. She danced barefoot in Paris for herself, finally free to be herself. Everything changed again in 1961 when Joan entered a Greenwich Village club and saw a scruffy young Bob Dylan sing. She was famous. He wasn't. But hearing him sing song to Woody shook her. His words were compelling despite his rough voice. Later, she stated it broke her inside. It was stunning. Later at a party, they connected more. Dylan sang with God on Our Side. Joan regarded him differently after that song. He was more than talented, she realized. Joan helped Dylan rise over the next few years with her fame. She invited him to sing with her at the Newport Folk Festival in 1963 for 10,000 people. She believed in him even though the crowd didn't adore him. She took him on tour, gave him stage time, and introduced his songs to large audiences. She sang Dylan's songs for over half her Queen's event. She told her admirers Bobby Dylan says what many people my age feel but cannot articulate. They performed in the March on Washington on the same day Martin Luther King Jr. gave his A Dream speech. It was evident. Dylan was more than a songwriter. Joan helped him become a movement voice. But celebrity altered things. Dylan outgrew their partnership by 1965. He invited her on a UK tour. He left her off the stage once there. Joan stepped backstage puzzled and heartbroken. Why he didn't invite her to sing puzzled her. Dylan unexpectedly married Sarah, while pregnant with his child. Years later, Joan said Dylan crushed her heart. So I was stoned on talent. For him, the choice was clear. Sarah would grant his request. Joan wouldn't. He wanted no partner. The man sought control. Joan recorded an album of Dylan's songs in 1968 despite the discomfort. It was Any Day Now. She randomly selected tunes by spreading his sheet music on the floor and closing her eyes. 16 songs were chosen, including several Dylan has never recorded. Amazing result. Her voice was lauded, especially her eerie anger tears. Artwork for the CD was drawn by her. Not merely a record. It was her method of processing everything they'd shared and lost. Joan Baez was 22 when she addressed a huge throng at the 1963 March on Washington. She sang We Shall Overcome before Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. Joan experienced racism as a child. They endured discrimination since her father was Mexican and her mother Scottish. She fought for justice her whole life because of that sorrow. 4 years ago, the Newport Folk Festival gave her her big break. Her voice was now ringing throughout the National Mall, singing an eternal anthem. Her name related. The 250,000-person March on Washington was mostly black. It advanced the 1964 Civil Rights Act and 1965 Voting Rights Act. That turning point included Joan's voice. No ordinary performer, but a symbol of how music can alter the world. Joan participated in the Selma to Montgomery marches 2 years later in March 1965. These followed Bloody Sunday, when police brutally attacked peaceful marchers on Edmund Pettus Bridge. Joan trekked 54 miles to Montgomery with thousands. She was photographed conversing, listening, and participating with the marchers. She sang at Stars for Freedom with Nina Simone, Tony Bennett, and Harry Belafonte the night before the final rally at the Alabama State Capitol. It went beyond performance. A call to action. It works. Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act later that year. She also refused to perform in segregated locations. Joan declined to perform at Southern institutions that didn't admit black students in the early 1960s. Instead, she performed at historically black institutions and universities. This decision was risky for her career and even dangerous. At one Miles College performance in Alabama, she came as Birmingham Police Chief Bull Connor ordered mass arrests. Martin Luther King Jr. and his entourage stayed at one of the few local motels that welcomed black and white visitors. Joan did too. She discussed more than justice. She lived it. Joan Baez took a risk in 1964. She skipped 60% of her income taxes. That money would fund the Vietnam War, she said. It garnered national notice. One of the earliest major wartime tax resistance incidents. A movement arose as others followed her. Although she wasn't jailed, her protests intensified. She was arrested twice in 1967 for obstructing an Oakland Military Center entrance. Her mom was there. Both served over a month in prison. Many saw this as powerful peaceful resistance. In the early 1970s, hundreds refused war taxes. Some refused to pay their phone bills because tax funds the military. Joan performed something rare in December 1972. She entered war immediately. She went to North Vietnam with peace campaigners. They wanted to send American convicts Christmas letters and express human rights concerns. While they were there, the U.S. bombed Hanoi heavily. Joan hid in a hotel bunker for 11 days during bombings. She documented everything. Explosions. Children playing in rubble. Bombing halted Christmas Eve service. She later said that was her first realization of her own mortality. Her lifelong memory of the encounter. Joan was expanding before that trip. She founded the Institute for the Study of Nonviolence in 1965 using music money. She started it with her mentor, Ira Sandpearl, in Carmel Valley, California. Not everyone accepted them. Locals worried the institute would draw hippies and cause trouble. They tried legally, but Joan persisted. She quietly reopened school in December. Gandhi and Thoreau were taught at the institute. Students learned to write, talk, and organize nonviolent protests. After 4 years in Carmel Valley, it moved to Palo Alto. And ultimately became Santa Cruz's Nonviolence Resource Center. Joan built significant activist ties through this. One was Jane Fonda. They first idolized each other. She met him in Rome in 1967 while filming a movie. Joan suddenly appeared in Jane's kitchen, held her hands, and said they were wonderful. Magical moment. Years later, their ideas diverged. Both visited Vietnam but had differing views of the administration. The breakup was revealed in 1979. Joan helped place full-page ads in major newspapers. It called the Vietnamese government a human rights violator. She asked them to end torture and open their prisons to outsiders. Jane dissented. She wrote a letter defending the Vietnamese government and criticizing Joan. This split stunned many in the peace movement. It proved that allies might disagree deeply. Joan Baez addressed a powerful letter to her parents at 50 in 1991. She hid something awful for years. She implicated her father, Albert Baez, in the letter. Respected physicist who co-invented the X-ray microscope of sexually molesting her as a child. This wasn't her memory. It began when her sister Mimi called and said, "I think something dreadful happened in our youth. Do you want to investigate like I will in therapy?" Albert denied everything. The recollections were fake, he added, supplied by therapists. He dubbed it false memory syndrome. Despite not knowing the details, Joan believed something had happened. In a later documentary, she said, "Are never sure. Even if 20% was real, it was enough to cause chaos." She forgave her father before his 2007 death, despite the anguish. When he was dying, she sang to him in his wheelchair. They shared a somber, heartfelt moment. Joan appeared serene and graceful, especially on stage. However, she struggled inside. She later admitted to childhood mental illness. She was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder, which fractured her mind into personalities. One was Diamond Joan. Her voice and story were taken over by a 12-year-old German kid whose parents survived the Holocaust. Her poems and songs reflected these traits. Along with Did, she had anxiety, despair, panic attacks, and poor insomnia. It got so terrible that she crashed even in pleasant situations. She stated the sentence felt endless. Her emotional health damaged her relationship with Gabriel, her son. "I wasn't there for him," she said. "I was there often but not always." In the late 1970s and early 1980s, things worsened. Lost after the Vietnam War. The causes that gave her purpose disappeared. "I need to figure out my purpose on planet," she said. She was reliant on medications, Quaaludes, and anti-anxiety medication for 8 years. Her feelings were muted, but nothing changed. When asked how she quit, she joked, "President Carter made me quit. I lost access to those amazing medications once he prohibited them. I gave them up." A dark joke that told the truth. Outside forces terminated her addiction, not willpower. She began therapy at 16 in 1957. Her parents were advised by a psychologist she had many mental issues and a sense of inferiority. That first session started a lifetime of therapy. She saved hundreds of therapy cassette tapes throughout the years to make sense of her life. But she avoided diving too deep for decades. She stated it was too scary to handle. She eventually allowed herself to tackle the tough stuff in her 50s. She rediscovered memories through hypnosis. It was hard. She said therapy was like removing emotional debris. However, it led her to light. A tranquility she had never experienced. Joan Baez boldly changed course once her turbulent engagement with Bob Dylan ended. One Day at a Time, her January 1970 album, astonished many. It represented her deep dive into country music, recorded at Bradley's Barn in Tennessee. Not quite unexpected. Her then-husband David Harris loved country music. His refusal to fight in the Vietnam War landed him in prison. In prison, Baez recorded the album in the style of David's LP, another country-inspired record she created for him the year before. This change was political, not personal. People considered folk music left-wing and insurgent. Country was often conservative. Baez crossed a boundary other musicians avoided by going country. The album included songs from many genres. Willie Nelson, Pete Seeger, and Joe Hill protested. Baez debuted her own tunes. Sweet Sir Galahad was for her sister Mimi. And a song for David, her spouse, revealing her new songwriter side. Baez made another creative risk with classical music a few years ago. She worked with composer Peter Shikula, known for his hilarious alter persona PD, from 1966 until 1968. Cue back. They made 3 distinct albums. The first CD, Noel, included full orchestras performing classic Christmas tunes. Next, Joan used classical instruments to reinterpret Beatles, Paul Simon, Tim Hardin, and Donovan tunes. Baptism, an odd and powerful mix of spoken word and song, took us through our time. Baez recited Joyce and Whitman poems. Supported by symphonic music. Folk listeners weren't used to this style of music, especially in the late 60s, when most musicians were electric and psychedelic. However, Baez took a calmer, more reflective path, demonstrating her willingness to stand out. Her 1974 language leap was another brave move. She released Gracias a Vida, a mostly Spanish album. Timing was key. The new military administration had assassinated Chilean folk singer Victor Jara months earlier. She wanted to honor him and others like him. Despite not speaking Spanish, she performed with passion and skill, even singing one song in Catalan. Latin American listeners were moved by the record. The profanity made it less popular in the US, but critics appreciated Baez's earnestness and lovely delivery. Te Recuerdo Amanda, Chiara's sorrowful song, stood out. Dida, a dreamlike duet with Joni Mitchell, was also included. The Guantanamera she sang wasn't pop. A meaningful and respectful tribute to its Cuban heritage. The song that defined her career followed. Dylan's 1974 surprise call started it all. From a payphone, he read her the lyrics to his new song, Lily, Rosemary, and the Jack of Hearts. This call brought back many memories. Baez penned Diamonds and Rust, expressing their beauty and anguish. Raw and beautiful lyrics. Dylan was the original vagrant with eyes bluer than robin's eggs, she remembered. The song resonated with audiences. Baez quipped that Dylan invited her to play it on the Rolling Thunder review tour about her ex-husband. Dylan rejected it. Years later, he admitted to being in Joan's writing. Who? I still marvel at it. Joan Baez, 41, met 27-year-old Steve Jobs in 1982. They met through Baez's sister Mimi, a charity worker who required prison computers. Jobs was immediately taken to Baez's wit and intelligence. 3 years of intense dating followed their friendship. Jobs contemplated marrying her but refrained. A close acquaintance said Jobs wanted a family but knew Baez, who had a teenage son, wouldn't allow it. A Ralph Lauren store had a memorable moment. Jobs suggested Baez buy a red dress, but she stated she couldn't afford it. Left a mark. They maintained contact following their 1985 breakup. Baez later thanked Jobs in her memoir for encouraging her to use a word processor. Left one in her kitchen. Baez had other surprising relationships. At 22, she dated Kim, or Kimmy, in the early 1960s. It lasted 2 years. Openly discussing that relationship was rare at the time. However, Baez addressed it in a 1972 interview in her 2023 documentary, I Am a Noise. Kim was reckless and didn't care what others thought. Baez recalled them going throughout town in boots, braces, and unkempt hair. She said they were thugs. Baez's new perspective on love was relaxing after years with men. She claimed leaving this event out of her biography would have been like leaving out a significant chunk of her life. In recent years, Baez found extraordinary peace in trees. Since 2010, she's talked to them. She named one across from her house the counselor since it's vital. She approaches that tree for answers when she's anxious or has huge problems. She was inspired by a spiritual book she originally felt was stupid but changed her mind. She built a 20-foot oak treehouse behind her property. In summer, she climbs and sleeps there. She calls it magical. She can sense the wind from birds flying close. While climbing down, she fell and wounded herself, requiring hospitalization. She would rather the tree than a therapist. She says the tree is her therapist. Even in her 80s, Baez dances barefoot for 15 minutes every morning. While dancing to Gypsy Kings, she forgets everything. She believes it keeps her grounded and upbeat. She even danced on a chat show at 84 in 2025. She performed an interpretive dance to a Cypress Hill song with a full orchestra after discussing American democracy. It was shocking and unforgettable. Baez sees dancing as more than movement. It brings joy, defiance, and spiritual youth. Baez found new ways to express herself at 77. Her painting began. Her first solo exhibition featured activist and liberation fighter images in 2017. The public adored it. In 2021, she had a second show with Kamala Harris, Greta Thunberg, and Dr. Fauci. Trust, her Fauci artwork, went viral. Using art, she continued her lifelong quest for justice. Joan Baez, I Am a Noise, a 2023 documentary, followed. She revealed new information. She revealed her father's childhood maltreatment. She revealed how trauma caused mental health issues and a 1990 multiple personality diagnosis. The film revealed her other side. She felt adrift after the Vietnam War. Part addicted to activism and part silently fighting sadness. He had always seemed bold, and this portrait was unique and honest. Baez published her debut poetry book in 2024. When You See My Mother, Ask Her to Dance was a personal collection. Some of her poetry were influenced by her personalities and composed throughout her 90s therapy years. Her poetry focused on childhood, recollection, healing, and growth, not gossip or romance. A few-line poem honoring Duluth's smart boy Bob Dylan is calm and respectful.